Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 4 of the 62 Who Knew podcast. We are so happy to have our regular guests, or 2 of our regular guests, and a very special guest today. But just for 15 seconds for people that are new to the podcast, 62 Who Knew is all about the double-edged sword of longer lifespans. And our goal is to make the last 30 years of your life the best 30 years of your life. And all our episodes and all our guests have levels of expertise in that area. And we're so happy to have everybody here today. First, of course, Mr. Jon Thomas, the National Director of Amada Home Care, the #1 home care company in the country. I'm not sure if that's mathematically correct, but it's correct in my heart. And that's all that counts. And because it's, my podcast.
That's right, Mike.
Secondly, it is.
Your heart is
that's
all
right.
that.
Welcome, John. That's right. Yeah. Second is Mr. Matt McCann. Now, what I'm about to say is mathematically and factually true. The founder and president of LTC News, the #1 source of long-term care in the nation, not just for consumers, but for agents themselves. That's not only in my heart, that is a fact. And a long-term care insurance specialist to the degree of being in the top 2% of long-term care insurance sales professionals in the country. Welcome, Matt.
Glad to be here.
That was all factual, wasn't it? I didn't make any of that up.
Oh, well, universe. The universe.
Oh, universe, yes.
Get the country. The universe.
Yes, universe. Wait a minute. Let me make that note.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, our guest this week, which is, we've had great guests so far. But this young lady, Miss Cathy Sikorski, yes, young lady, compared to me, hey, everybody's young. So, but be that as it may, was on the 62 Who Knew television show, our predecessor, several times. And she's just a fantastic speaker, known well throughout the country, and will be at the Philadelphia National Long-Term Care Convention. When is that, in 2 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, and we'll be there interviewing people. Of course, so will Matt McCann with LTC News and Jon Thomas. But let me give you a little background about Cathy. Cathy is an elder law attorney, national speaker, and media guest who promotes financial and legal preparation in caregiving and aging. The author of 3 books, Sikorski's most recent book is 12 Conversations, How to Talk to Almost Anyone about Long-Term Care Planning. Cathy has educated financial long-term care insurance and HR professionals, caregivers, social workers, and corporate teams about LTC planning throughout the country. Her appearances include television, radio, podcasts. She was featured on the Huffington Post, AARP, and I like this one because it's hard to say, and is a she source for expert for Women's Media Center. That's not on the seashore, is it, she source?
No.
Because that would be
Washington,
even worse.
D.C.
I'm going to say something now, Matt. Go ahead, Matt. I know you want to say
I was
something.
going to ask you to say that again because
It's
I'm not
hard.
sure the listener heard you say that for the first time.
I'm going to say something right now that's a little different because, and Matt, you might say, I have an exception to this because that's how you politely say to me, Michael, you're full of it, and I disagree with you. And I agree, I like your politeness. This will be our 4th episode. And it does appear that this episode is leading us back to long-term care in many ways. And I really don't want, as our audience grows into the tens of thousands and past that, for people to think, is this really just a long-term care episode or podcast? Why does he call it 62 Who Knew? Why doesn't he call it I Can See I Need LTC? That rhymes too, And I do want to assure all our listeners, old and new, that number one, our guest this week has many levels of expertise, and we're not just an LTC podcast. We are going to be bringing on guests weekly in every aspect of financial planning, healthcare, wellness, psychological ramifications of when you do get up one day and have nowhere to go after 30 years. Like I said, Wall Street Journal and New York Times greatest authors. We're going to be bringing on sports stars, national known sports stars that are in their 60s, talking about how they planned and what they do. So do I want us to be known as a long-term care podcast? 50% of me says no. And 50% of me says this is the number one problem in the United States of America today. And that's coming from a 66-year-old host. So I wouldn't be ashamed of it being a long-term care insurance podcast, but I want our future and past listeners to know we're going to be covering a gambit of things. Anyway, that was my thing.
So what you're saying, Mike, is that there's lots of consequences to aging, and we're going to cover it all.
See, that's why, you know what, Anthony, make a note. Make a note to double Matt's salary for appearing on the podcast.
Thank you. Great.
Kathy,
Yes.
before we get to you, one of the most fun things about having you here is that you are an attorney, and it is literally against the rules in your state for you to sell us on something.
That is true.
So when you talk about having a totally unbiased opinion, and I know you're doing some things for the estate with your mother that you just told us about, this is an actual expert that is not benefiting other than morally and ethically and in her heart on whether you take her advice or not. And I think that's wonderful.
Attorneys in Pennsylvania cannot sell financial products or services. We can recommend people who are experts in the field. We can explain to you how that's really important in your planning piece, how we are doing things that require financial services, right? Long-term care is going to require financial services. Planning requires money. But the beauty of that is, it gives us a level of credibility when we say, I'm a big fan of long-term care insurance, and this is the reason why. I see how it fits into most people's plans, whether it be, all the myriad kinds of policies that now exist, which didn't even exist 25 or 30 years ago, and all the kinds of care that you're going to be walking into if you have a crisis, or if you don't even have a crisis, you're just wanting to plan. So it's impossible to talk about anything 62 and you that doesn't have to do with money, and from my point of view, legal planning. It's just impossible. Those things are intertwined unforgivably, and we got to have these conversations. And it may sound like we're doing a lot of long-term care, all the time, but there's no getting away from the fact that what happens if you or someone you love gets sick, because it's not just a long-term care plan for you. If your mom gets sick, if your dad gets sick, if your uncle, your cousin, or your spouse gets sick, you're in a long-term care planning situation, even if you're perfectly healthy.
Yeah. And your latest book is just so on point. 12 conversations that you can have about this, because even though Matt and I and sometimes Jon and a lot of times Cassandra disagree on certain things, one of the things we all agree on is the emotion of discussing this years before you need it.
Yes.
Is very difficult, and it's probably the main reason, or one of the two main reasons, that the majority of this country doesn't do long-term care planning. It's woefully neglected until they need it, and then it's a little late.
Well, we started last week talking about this, Michael, and I said to you, you said, what's the most important thing you talk about? And I said, powers of attorney. That's the most important thing I talk about. And I said, there isn't a person in this country 18 years of old or older who should not have some form of a power of attorney. So that's not long-term care planning. That's not even age planning. That's not even long-term, planning. What that is an understanding that an accident, an injury, a problem can happen to anyone. And once you are an adult, if you don't have someone in place to take care of your affairs, you are going to have a problem.
So, Cathy, explain that, because I'm sure a lot of listeners, power of attorney, that sounds really important and really big and really complicated. What is it?
And really expensive. Everybody decides, that's something legal and expensive. I can't do it. Okay, 30-second definition of a power of attorney. It is a document that you sign giving authority to someone you trust, who is now called your agent, to act as if they are you in any capacity, either for your financial affairs or your healthcare affairs, or both. There's a large percentage of people who have healthcare powers of attorney. Many people got them online, they heard about them, whatever. They got them at the senior center. It's awesome. The percentage of people who have the financial power of attorney, and it has to be a durable financial power of attorney, and I'll tell you why in 1 second, but the percentage is very small. And I think Matt is right. The reason is people are scared. They think it's some big, ugly legal animal that they don't understand or don't know about, and they can't afford to get it. You can't afford not to get it. Sorry, that's the first thing. And the reason you can't afford not to get it is if you walk out, any one of us walks out the door tomorrow and gets hit by a bus or has a traumatic brain injury or has a stroke, somebody has to take care of your affairs. They have to. And if you don't have this document in place that you've chosen this person and you are now incapable of choosing, the court chooses the person for you. And that's the mess we know as guardianship, which all I'm going to say is nobody wants that. You have to go to court. You have to get a doctor to testify. You have to pay money. You have to report all the time. Nobody wants that. And the way to solve that is to get a power of attorney, right? Okay. When my kids went to college, they went far away, and I made them sign powers of attorney, healthcare and financial, because if you've had a kid in college, you know they won't talk to you. They don't care if you're paying the bill. They couldn't care less. They will not give you their grades. They will not tell you their medical condition, and they will not tell you their financial issues, right? Because they are adults. So that's 18. Now let's move on from there. So you have to have it. They can be complicated or they can be simple. That depends on your status in life. Like, what kind of assets do you have? What kind of complicated life do you have? An 18-year-old does not need the same document as a 65-year-old with a bunch of investments and IRAs and 401ks, right? So maybe an 18-year-old could download it from the internet to generally give that information. But I don't want you doing that if you have a lot of assets. And the reason it has to be a durable financial power of attorney, because that word durable means it endures if you become disabled or incapacitated, which seems like a no-brainer. Oh, pardon the pun.
So Cathy, I mean, I know a lot of people are suspicious. They don't always trust the legal system or lawyers. Can I get out of that? I mean, I give you power of attorney. Am I stuck? Are you going to take away my rights?
No, because it does not. Okay, a couple things. Yes, you can put, first of all, pick someone you trust. Let's start there, right? Pick someone you absolutely know and trust. That's number one. Most spouses give each other the power of attorney, right? So pick someone that you trust. Secondly, it doesn't mean that you give up all your power by signing this document. It just means if you need this person to do something and you're not capable of doing it, you now have a person who can do it, right? So my mom was 95 when she passed away, but up until that minute, almost, she was completely capable of handling all her affairs. She kept immaculate records, but sometimes she didn't want to go to the bank. She didn't want to talk to the financial advisor. She didn't want to deal with savings bonds and cashing them out. She wanted somebody else to do it, right? She was perfectly capable. And if she wanted to do it, she could, but she also had somebody in place to do things for her if she didn't want to. Now, sadly, my mom was diagnosed with a very fast-moving and very devastating brain tumor. So the last 6 months were really tough, and she was no longer capable of doing any of those things. And she still had someone in place that could do it without her having to be involved at all. So it has levels, and you can put protections in there. You can put limitations about what this person can and cannot do, right? So this is why you need a lawyer. I'm sorry. I know you don't want to hear that. I know you think you can go to XYZ, website and download it, but you've got to have an attorney who's talking to you and hopefully your financial advisor, if you have one, to understand what you want this person to be able to do and how complicated their powers will be, right? And I just
going to take a
go ahead. No,
just going to take a 1-minute break for a quick commercial. And then we're going to come right back. And our first commercial this week is about Mr. Tafa Jefferson and Jon Thomas and Amada Senior Care. At Amada, quality care is our priority. We look forward to ways to make everyday tasks special and simple. Amada's in-home caregivers not only take care of daily essentials like cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping, but they also go above and beyond to make their clients smile. Recently, one of our caregivers discovered that her client had spent his whole life farming. So she purchased some seeds before her visit and planted a garden for them to tend together. And now you know why I think Amada's number one in here to me. At Amada, we know in-home care isn't just about performing tasks on a to-do list. It can be so hard for seniors to accept new limitations and a stranger into their home. Our caregivers understand that. It's essential to show compassion and really connect with the clients, and that's what Amada does, and it makes the transition so much easier. Amada caregivers are trained to provide assistance with so much personal care in addition to their everyday living activities. And Jon, we're always so glad to have you or Tafa on the podcast, and as to have you as national sponsors as Amada.
Thank you, Mike. No, I love that commercial, and you read it so well.
Oh, thank you so much. It's almost like you wrote it for me. No, wait a minute. And okay, well, welcome back. We are back with our fourth episode of 62 Who Knew. Our regulars, Jon Thomas, Matt McCann, are here from Amada In-Home Care, Senior Care, LTC News, and a very special guest, Miss Cathy Sikorski, national speaker on many financial products, including long-term care, and authors of several incredible books. The one that we happen to be concentrating on today is the 12 Conversations You Can Have with People About LTC. I'm going to diverse just for a second, unless Jon and Matt have another question for Cathy on what we were just talking about.
One quick question, because I know it's on everyone's mind. You mentioned seeing an attorney to do this, and I can see why that would be extremely important. Is this a really expensive document? I mean, how much would be, obviously, if I'm Donald Trump, I'm a little bit more, or Elon Musk, I've got more assets, it's probably a bigger deal. But for an average person.
So it doesn't have to be. And obviously areas of the country are going to be cheaper than other areas of the country, right? Listen, this is really important. Call law firms and ask them how much it costs. You don't have to walk in there. Well, if they don't, hang up and call another one and say, unless I know how much it costs, I choose not to be your client. I don't understand why people believe that they don't have the right to know how much it's going to cost. Now, the first thing they're going to say is, it's a little complicated. We don't know what your assets are. It depends. But you can say, give me the range. I need to know the range. What is the most expensive document you would do for me, and what is the least expensive document, right? You have a right to know that. Just like you have a right to know how much a funeral costs. That's a big deal now, right? You're supposed to know that up front, et cetera. So just them and ask. Other thing I'm going to always say is get a recommendation from your friends. Your friends, if they're your friends, they're not spending a lot of money either, because they're the same people as you. They're like, I don't want to spend $3,000. What can I get for $750 or $500, whatever it is, right? So do that. The other thing I want to sort of slip in here before we get to whatever your next issue is, Michael, is a lot of people who are listening to this are still working. They are at work. Most of them. One of the best benefits that goes unused at work is legal benefits. You get a discount to talk to a lawyer and sometimes to create documents, right? And then I want you to do this. I want you to tell that lawyer that you have a whole family of people you're going to bring into the office. Maybe you'll give me my documents for free, and maybe you'll give my family the discount. Lawyers don't want to turn away business. They love to have legacy business, just like financial advisors and insurance people, right? But don't forget about the fact that you probably have a benefit at work where you can get discounted legal services.
And before we go to the next question, I'm going to add in something just for 10 seconds. And Matt and Jon have heard me say this. How many times that I'm doing a mortgage, because that's my career, and somebody says, Michael, can we close in a trust? And of course we can close in a trust, but of course send me a copy so, we can take a look at it. And I get the trust, and it says trust, and it has their name, and it's on this legal paper, but everything's blank. So I'll call back and go, I think you just sent me, the wrong copy. Send me the trust. No, that's what we did. I go, no, there's nothing in it.
Trust.
There's nothing. Well, we paid $95 to trust.com. They said that's our trust. I said, but there's nothing in it. Don't you want that? And call a lawyer. Lawyers may not have the best personal reputation in the world, which is, but there are bad lawyers and good lawyers. Like there's bad and good of everybody.
Listen, our friend John is at an elder law conference right now as we speak. And John, I want you to tell these people, because this is what I tell other people. Elder lawyers are hug lawyers. We are in the business of giving our clients a legal hug. We want them to feel, secure and at peace and know that they are getting the kind of advice that is going to be good for them and their families. It's a very different kind of law, and it's a very kind of small area of the bar. And John is at an awesome conference right now, and I'm sure he's meeting the same kind of people. Don't be afraid of us. We're great as a bar.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned it, Cathy. I am joining live from a Elder Law Planning Association conference, and really, really good conversation. And as a senior care and home care company, we're interested in working with elder law attorneys because there's so much that you all do, Cathy, and so much protection and planning and coordination that families need as their loved ones age, that attorneys offer a lot of protection and services to those families. I think you could probably do a better job than I could, Cathy, but you mentioned powers of attorney. I know there's a lot of other areas in families' lives that you engage as an attorney. What are some of the other ways that you engage with families in elder law planning and aging?
So, and not only having been a caregiver for 8 different family members in my own house, family members and friends, so I have a personal stake in this. I understand this from a very personal level, but I also know that because I told you in the beginning, I can't sell you anything financially. I can sell you legal services, but no financial products. I am such a big advocate of making sure that we coordinate our efforts with people like Amada, right? That we have at our fingertips places, insurance agents, financial advisors, home care places that we can refer to, that we are trusted sources that we can refer our clients to when we don't have the kind of an organization that actually you're at right now, right? Some of our lawyers are just single practitioners in small towns, whatever. We don't have access to having a caregiver or a geriatric counselor or something on staff, but we must have access to that information because our clients aren't in a bubble, especially if they come in a crisis. They need all these people. They don't just need us, right? And so I would say the list is endless, and I'd sort of like to just steer back to look at your benefits at work too, because you probably have all kinds of cool things there that you're not paying attention to or taking advantage of.
Good point. Well, another area of expertise that you kind of staggered me with when you were on the television show, and I never thought about it, but I'm guilty of it. People saving for retirement now is altogether different than our parents and their parents. Let's face it, unless you're a police officer or a county worker or a government worker, the days of pensions in the huge companies of this great country are gone. And we now not only save differently for retirement, as you've taught me through IRAs and 401ks, but in many cases, this model of saving is then devastating when it comes time to retirement, because you look in and you go, I don't have enough. Well, this is my retirement. And this being about one of your books also and your level of expertise, baby boomers and Generation X just don't get that this is not enough.
So that's true. But there's another piece to it, which is a super hot button that I have, is that people don't understand that the way we save money has changed so dramatically, and it can absolutely lead to a healthy spouse becoming destitute, even if a sick spouse has $2 million in their IRA. What do I mean by that? Healthy, this is very typical of even Gen X as they're coming up, right? But they're in their 40s and 50s now, and then their parents and or grandparents are in their 70s, 80s, 90s. So much 90-year-olds don't seem to have IRAs and 401ks, but definitely even 80-year-olds and 70-year-olds have that savings mechanism. Pensions kind of went away and people started loading up. And even corporations gave you this beautiful match, right? Take the match. It's free money. So now people have $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in these IRAs. And let's say mom and dad, let's call them John and Mary Ann. John has a beautiful $2 million IRA. Mary Ann raised 6 kids and she never was in the workforce with any significance, but this is their money. This is their retirement funds. They're having fun. They're buying cars, going on vacation, taking their grandkids on trips, and John has a massive stroke. And the nursing home says, well, isn't this awesome? John has $2 million and Marianne has nothing. Because IRAs and 401ks by definition can only ever be owned by one person. Ever. They are not joint. Marianne has no access to that money and no right to that money.
Wow.
The only way she has access, anybody want to guess? Power
No, what are
of
you gonna
attorney.
guess?
Our attorney.
Power of attorney.
That's how she has access. And that power of attorney must have gifting language. It literally has to say, John has to say, I allow my Marianne to gift my money to herself as much as she wants. That's called unlimited gifting power. You can have limited, you can have whatever. But in this case, especially with spouses, especially if one is much more heavily weighted with money than the other one, right? We have found that people without that power who are unprepared for this are like, I can't get into that money. And in guardianship, if you don't have the power and he's incapacitated, courts aren't necessarily going to say, okay, Miriam, we'll let you have as much money as you want. That's his money. That's for him. Good luck with that.
Okay, so I got a question here. So, because there are probably listeners going through this right now in that kind of situation.
Yes.
So isn't there something called a minimum distribution at a certain age? And with the other spouse, the spouse that doesn't have that, in this case, Marianne,
Yes.
could she not just use those distributions for her needs as well, or no?
Well, it depends. Are you talking about the Medicaid minimum monthly distribution, or are you just talking about, well, other
Forget
than that?
Medicaid at the moment.
Right, they're not on Medicaid. He's got $2 million.
Medicaid, you've got $3 million sitting
Correct.
here. She's used to taking vacations, buying cars, and going out with her grandkids.
Right.
Her husband's got the money in this 401k sitting there.
Correct.
There's a minimum distribution. Can she control how much, or does he have to control it? And if he's
Technically,
not
he
able
does,
to,
and he's not. So let's say he can't ever. Let's say he's really done, right? She has to become his guardian. Let's say she becomes his guardian. That money is still his money. Some states, not my state, but some states automatically have an allowance for spousal, support. She would have to ask the court for some, let's say her Social Security is, I don't know, $700 a month because she never really did work. Or let's say he made a lot of money, so maybe she's getting half of his. So let's say she gets $1,500 a month, but it surely isn't paying their bills, right? What she's used to. There are then ways in Medicaid planning to take some of that money and use it for her. However, it's got to have that gifting, because she's giving herself his money.
Makes sense.
And Cathy, if I understand right, without that gifting provision or some protection set up, the nursing home may own the rights to that income, right? If it's more than what he's getting out of the IRA to cover his costs.
Only in the sense that she has to pay their bill. She has to pay the bill.
She has to pay the bill. Yeah.
Got to pay the bill. Bill's $12,000 a month, right? That's like the average right now in this country, right? So let's say she's paying $12,000 a month.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so you mentioned the Medicaid portion. This can be interesting because we're learning things here, including me. So in that scenario, guy's got his 401k. It's $3 million. He's got money. He can pay for his nursing home insurance, no insurance. There's money there for him. It's his.
Right.
He can't qualify for Medicaid. He's got too much money.
Right.
Poor wife didn't work. She worked. She was ran the
Stay-at-home
household,
mom,
right?
took care of in-laws,
Exactly.
the whole
Her
9
job.
yards, right? Right.
Exactly. She has no formal savings other than maybe some bank accounts. All of a sudden, she needs long-term care. There's no insurance.
Right.
Is she eligible for Medicaid? And how does that impact his assets?
That's a really good question. There's a couple, oh my God, there's so many things here. So it depends what state you're in. In my state, Medicaid, because that's his money. I don't know what state you're in, but in some states, that $4 million is now money for her care. if she needs Medicaid, but not if she's just at home, needs to pay her mortgage and take a trip and whatever. Do you see what I mean? That's eligible Medicaid dollars because that's considered a marital asset.
On a federal law, that's a marital asset, but
and that's a state version. States can decide. Do IRAs count in your Medicaid? And in my state in Pennsylvania, no, my IRA is completely protective if my husband goes into a nursing home.
So with the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005, which is a federal law,
correct,
doesn't that require someone to qualify for Medicaid?
What are determined marital assets is a state. States were allowed to decide that. Okay,
the states
were allowed to decide that after that act. But here's a really interesting question, Matt. What if, even though he had $3 million, he had a brilliant insurance agent and the wife said, wait a minute, she didn't even know, but she said, I think we should have long-term care insurance. And what if he has an indemnity policy? So now they're getting checks, which she can use for whatever she wants, right? And take the money out of his IRA to pay for his care.
Matt, quickly go over for the audience indemnity policy.
So there are a variety of long-term care insurance policies. One is what we call reimbursement. Insurance company is paying for either directly or indirectly care based on bills. A cash indemnity policy, you qualify for benefits, all the qualifications, the triggers on any tax-qualified long-term care policy is the same by federal law. But they're just giving you the money. Direct. It has nothing to do with submitting bills, knowing how much the cost of care is. It's all tax-free up to a certain limit, which no one really is going to go over generally anyhow. And it's a beautiful thing because cash is as good as money. Someone said that, famous. And you can then do anything you want with that money. So it gives you a lot of extra flexibility.
I never thought about that until today. I mean, I'm a big fan of long-term care insurance in all its iterations, of course, because I can see all the problems that can happen. But it never even occurred to me until we had this part of it, even though I've done this actual tap dance about Joe and Marianne a million times. That's my parents' names. And but the thought that if they had a policy, because rich is a relative term, but people think they can self-insure, that ugly term.
They can self-fund. They can never self-insure.
Thank you. Because you're right. I agree 100%. So they think they can self-fund, and even that is at $12,000 a month, right? But here's a perfect example of you have $3 million and self-funding could actually be the worst possible thing you could do to your wife.
I got to yell something in here because I always go back to this because most clients that I do business with in my mortgage banking career, whether it be a reverse mortgage or a conforming or Fannie or Freddie or whatever, VA, let's forget the person that has $3 million for a second. And let's talk about the person that has several $100,000 in that 401k. Mm-hmm. What you're discussing now is the difference between life and death. It's the difference between the widow or widower having a quality of life for the rest of their life or having to worry about the bills as they come in. I mean, if that person, the person with $3 million, you want to know something? I did the math in my head because that's what I do. If they were paying $12,000 a month, which is $144,000 a year, they could pay that for 20 years until they die.
Except in the scenario
where she has no money.
In the scenario that Cathy just brought. If it's all in an account under his name without the proper legal planning.
No, I'm just saying he could stay in his home for $12,000 a month.
With the spouse.
She would be suffering crazy. But that same person was several $100,000 that wasn't smart enough to watch 62 Who Knew and buy long-term care insurance. He could have had.
But let's just say that couple with $700,000 had powers of attorney with gifting in it. She literally could take almost all of that money and do a Medicaid annuity, which is something I don't want to get into here because it's illegal. It's a legal fiction. Yeah, I mean, it's a tool. It's a tool, but it's an awesome tool that would actually keep her probably set for life, and they have less money.
Well, I
that
know we're
on.
due for a commercial here, but
Yes.
I think, Cathy, what you're saying is a lot of people think, someone who is in the long-term care insurance industry, oh, it's all about insurance. It's really about having a conversation, about having a plan. And when we come back from the break, I got a question about, because I know John has probably gone through this. When there is no plan, there's multiple siblings. There may or may not be money sitting around, and all the siblings disagree. And now an attorney is involved in how that works. If you can maybe address that when we come back.
When we come back from this latest commercial. This commercial is about one of our national sponsors who couldn't make it today because she's that busy, but we are very happy to have them. And of course, Matt is really a representative of them too. He wears several hats, but Platinum Long-Term Care Solutions, one of the, if not the largest long-term care insurance agencies in the country. It is interesting that the three top producers of that agency, of which Mr. McCann is one of, actually are all in the top 2 and 1% of the long-term care insurance company agencies in the country. Platinum is a very special company. Platinum LTC Solutions lends a combination of expertise and compassion to your long-term care insurance plan. Notice they didn't say policy, to their plan, as Matt is referring to now. Ranking in the top 2% of their industry, they bring their expertise to you and your entire family. They have a free, no-hassle process based on your unique situations and concerns. Their long-term care specialists shop all of the top insurers in the country for the best rates and coverage for you and your family. And just like for Amada Senior Care and for LTC News, to all our listeners, I was remiss on the first commercial. Go to www.62whoknew.com. Go to the Amada link. Go to the LTC News link. Go to the in-home care link and click so you can connect with one of these amazing professionals wherever you are in the country. Okay, if you're just joining us, welcome back to 62 Who Knew, the podcast that wants the last 30 years of your life to be the best. We are talking to Cathy Sikorski, a national expert on several different things, but what we're talking about right now is gifting through a power of attorney. It just staggers me. Well, it staggers me that I don't have a power of attorney. I'm just, look at that. How many people, and I just went through this. One of my best friends in life was 20 years older than me. I'm 66. He was 86. Mom lived to be 100. Dad lived to be 98. He just passed away 9 weeks ago. But with Mom living to be above 100 and Dad 98, he just wasn't prepared. He thought he was got another 10 years. He died at 86. And what his daughter Donna, who is just a wonderful human being, moved down from Michigan to be with Dad, kept him active, did trips. What she's going through now, because there was no POA, is staggering while suffering the loss of her father. So anyway, Matt, you had something for Cathy right before our last break.
Yeah, so often, whether you're a long-term care insurance specialist, I know we get these emails or calls from LTC News. I'm sure Amada and other organizations get these types of calls where, the fire is started. It's flames all over the place. No plan, no conversation has taken place. So you're the attorney here. Let's say there's 3 or 4 kids. Okay. Parents needs care. None of the kids are agreeing on what to do. So someone says, let's bring in an attorney. You may have run into this personally or know of this kind of situation. How do you get through that family crisis? And what steps, if siblings are disagreeing and no plan was done in advance, how do you get through that? Because that just seems like that's craziness.
It is. I just want you to know that I have 8 siblings in my family, and we have not had one argument this entire time. It's been amazing. I mean, I knew they were pretty great, but it's really been amazing. I'm very lucky that way. One thing you could do is get this book that says how to have conversations. The book Each chapter is a different conversation with your parents, with your siblings, with your financial advisor, with your lawyer, with your doctor, with yourself, okay? With your work about these caregiving issues, especially when they come to crisis. But here's the thing. I mean, obviously, the situation that you just described, Matt, I'm assuming what you're saying is there was no planning. And now we're in a room, the world is on fire, and we've got a bunch of people who are arguing about what to do. The first thing you got to do is pick a decider. You know, that famous quote, I'm the decider. You have to pick a decider. If I'm going to say there's going to be quite a few attorneys who are going to say, we're going to sit down and we're going to pick a decider. And until we do, we're not doing anything else, right? Because the attorney and a financial advisor probably has the same kinds of conversations. Often people go to their financial person before they even walk in my door. Mom's in the hospital. She's going to a nursing home. Where's the money? How do we pay for this? Right. And they're like, well, where's the legal documents? We don't have those. Okay. Well, now I got to send you to an attorney. And this is the thing that frustrates me as all get out. Financial advisors and attorneys and insurance people should be talking to each other all the time. And
that's a show into itself.
Amada and home care agencies all the time. But first you just have a decider. And once you do that, and that could be sometimes people, this is really important. A diagnosis is not a meaningful, statement that says you cannot sign legal documents. A diagnosis does not mean you can't sign legal documents. So if you are diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, it doesn't mean from that day forward you are now incapable of signing documents. It means, do you understand what you're signing? Are you doing this of your own free will? And if so, can a notary see that you are signing this yourself? And many people will have an accident or a stroke or whatever, but it doesn't mean they're incapable of understanding and still being able to sign legal documents, okay? That's really important because people think, okay, instantly, mom has early onset Alzheimer's, we're done. We can't. That's not true. You've got to just make sure that enough people decide in the room or with a physician or whatever that she is still capable of understanding what she's signing. So in that scenario, Matt, can the person still sign documents? Can they appoint somebody? If they can, awesome, right? If they can't, it doesn't matter. We're all going to court anyway. We're going to pick a guardian. Who do you want? And by the way, dubious honor, nobody wants that job. It's a horrible job.
Yeah.
You have to report to the court. You have to do paperwork. It's a horrible job. It's almost as bad as being an executor. In fact, it's worse. An executor's not a great job either. Here's a really important thing. Elder lawyers, which is who you are describing, Matt, and who Jon is in conference with right now, are lawyers who deal with these issues when people are sick, right? Elder lawyers are for live people. Estate lawyers are for dead people. It's really kind of that simple. Estate lawyers are dealing with what do you want to do with your stuff when you're dead? And we are not the same people. We have a lot of crossover. And some lawyers do both things, which is fine. It's awesome. But understand that if your mom is sick and you are in a crisis, you don't want to go see an estate attorney. You want to see someone who can deal with elder law issues, Medicaid issues, power of attorney issues, geriatric counselor issues, getting somebody in the house issues. Very different from a trust for when I die. Okay?
What an incredible, I mean, elder lawyers are for live people, estate attorneys
For dead
are for dead people. I really think I'm going to make a T-shirt
I like to make
that.
things simple. That is my superpower.
Probably sell so many of them that I might not even be here next week. Matt might be the host of 62.
John's going to beat you too. He's going to sell them at the conference starting tomorrow.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
There are two topics that I have on my list. We're never going to get to them. And hopefully you will come back, Cathy. But you brought up something personal, that you have personally had people in your home that you had taken care of. And we had a guest on the television show who has written a couple of books on this. And this staggers me also. Let's go back to earlier generations than me. You know, my parents, mom was a stay-at-home mom with the kids, and dad made the money. And that's not because they would be in their hundreds now. But in today's world, you know, mom and dad make the same amount of money. I'm sure there's some statistic that says maybe men are making more. I know they're not supposed to, but I write mortgages all the time where man's making low six figures and mom is an attorney or a registered nurse or a realtor making low six figures, and life is good. But then somebody gets sick. Let's say let's talk about mom now. And it's not even her parents. It could be her in-laws. But somebody gets sick, and it's always, I learned this from Mark Goldberg and Matt McCann, it's almost always that the wife, the woman in the couple goes, I'm going to take care of mom. So suddenly she's not being a nurse, she's not a stockbroker, she's not a real estate agent, she takes care of her family. Well, then her husband's father gets sick, and there she is. Now fast forward 30 years later, mom and dad make the same amount of money. Dad has X amount of hundreds of thousands in his 401k or IRA. Mom has a fraction of that. Well, how the hell did that happen? She took 10 or 15 years off to take care of everybody's sickness, which is, that boggles me. But that's what families do. And God, thank God for the women. They are usually ones with the heart. They're the caretakers. But how that affects women's retirement is staggering, how it comes back to haunt them.
Exactly. This is an absolute truth. We have less Social Security. We have less retirement funds. We have less, our salaries are lower, blah, 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 on and on and on.
And you live longer.
And we live longer.
So you need it worse.
Which is an insurance actually minus. That's a black mark against us from an insurance standpoint of view. So, all of this, quite frankly, leads to do some planning. Like it's on the wall. I don't know what else I can say. In fact, Matt, I would love to know. I thought I'd do an AI Google on this one. What is the one thing that convinces people to invest in long-term care insurance products?
Well, a couple. Long-term care insurance is not an investment. I want to be very careful with words because words are important.
Okay, awesome.
So long-term care is not an investment. It is insurance. And you don't convince people to buy long-term care insurance because that doesn't work. People do decide that they want long-term care insurance primarily because of family. They do not want to burden those they love. It is number one above the financial part, which is obviously important. Money's important. But when I go through claims, because I've been in the long-term care insurance as a specialist since 1998, I go through, unfortunately, lots of claims. And I usually deal with adult children. The first thing they mention after everything's in place is it gave them the time to be family. They don't mention money. Money is second. It is second. It's an important second. It's still second. And it's the consequences on family. And we've kind of alluded to some of that in our conversation on this particular show because, money and all that and the money here and qualified money, you can't do this, can't do that. But it is an adult daughter typically or a daughter-in-law that, and I'm going to use the word stuck, and it's not politically correct, but I'm going to say it, that they're stuck holding that responsibility. Caregiving is hard. Physically, emotionally, and financially, it is hard. And John, you can talk about this for the professionals who are trained to do that. Because your professionals, they get wrapped into the emotions of the caregiving situation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's important that we know what the impact is on us as family. Caregivers have that same issue, and I think the family, when they have professional caregivers come in, can reduce some of that on themselves, but for the professional, it's still difficult.
No, you're absolutely right, Matt. And I can't tell you the number of families that we talk to where they're in family and emotional turmoil, right? And if you can imagine, mom or dad has a stroke, and they have cognitive impairment. They can't tell their kids what they want. right, where they want to receive care, what their wishes are. Those siblings have to come to a decision together. And you know, like you've said, Cathy, and like you've said, Matt, there's typically a daughter that is put in charge of providing that care, being the decider. And often they're put in a position where they make a decision that their siblings don't agree with, right? And that leads to disagreement. It leads to turmoil in the family. It leads to broken relationships. Or that sibling that's providing the care, that daughter, has resentment that they were the one that had to raise their hand and provide care for mom and dad, and they gave up their career, or they gave up a life that they had a different picture for, and their siblings, didn't chip in. And so it puts you in a really tough position. And I think what insurance does is, it's not, as you said, Matt, it's not about the money, but what insurance does is it creates the potential for those siblings to make a decision that's in the best interest of everybody, right? If that daughter can pay for a professional caregiver, now that one sibling isn't the only one that's providing care for mom and dad. And it avoids the resentment and maybe the disagreement, because all of the options are on the table, right? They're not having to pick between one of three bad options. But because the insurance has a benefit to pay for care, now they have better options and can come to an agreement as kids. So I think that's really what insurance does. Is it's not about the money, but it is because of the possibilities that it provides.
Because it takes it.
Well, that's what money is, right?
Yeah.
If you think
Right.
about it.
Yeah,
But
right.
here's my question for you. How, this is where the problem lies, even with my own client, experiences, how to get that to translate to the next generation. You have now gone through this. You now understand. You now see this. You now need to decide you are not going to be that burden to your children, who might be 10 and 12 years old, right? We're not talking about, or 15 and 17. You might not be where you think that's age appropriate, but I will tell you, my husband and I bought long-term care insurance in our 40s. It was a benefit at his company. He worked for a Fortune 50 company, and I had my grandmother living here at 92, and I had a 2-year-old and a dog, and I'm like, oh my God, really? This is my life? And I saw the writing on the wall then, especially since they were trying to eat the dog food. I thought, okay, this is not going to be good. This is hard. So translating that to the next generation, right? While they're either in it or very close to the end of it, or have now, that's the challenge, Matt, that I see
It is.
going forward in planning.
Yeah. Matt and John have heard me say this, not only on the show, but they've heard me speak publicly. I was blessed to have a father that was just the most incredible man in the world, and we were as close as father and son can be from the time I remember till the time he left us, which was in his master bedroom in our house, because we lost mom way too early, so we bought a house with the 2 master bedrooms. They used to call it the mother-in-law suite, but we always laughed but when the time came, even when I was a teenager, I'm going to take care of Dad, because he took care of me my whole life. And like I said, it's a rough story to tell, but when things started going bad, and the first time, if he was alive, he'd kill me for telling the story, and because he was a World War II highly decorated ex-POW, a man's man, greatest generation. That's what they were, the greatest generation. And the first couple of times that he had a little accident in the middle of the night, and I was helping him, and we were cleaning his sheets, and he was still coherent. He was still going to my son's karate lessons. I was driving, going to see my daughter in her competitive cheerleading, but he was getting weak. And it was the second time, and he went, okay, this isn't working. I went, what do you mean it's not working? Everything's fine. No, I don't want it. He used language. I want you to be my son, not the person that wipes my. Okay, so go get it. Now, Dad didn't have long-term care insurance. Had the best insurance you can imagine, Medicare supplement. The Veteran Association has issues, they have issues, but not for ex-POWs. We would walk in and people would have a 4-hour wait. Dad would give his military number, whatever they call it, ID, and they would go, oh, Mr. Banner, just sit right there. We'll be with you in a few minutes. Even with all of that, I spent about $10,000 to $11,000 a month on in-home care. And this was close to 20 years ago. And knock wood, business in our mortgage company was good and I could afford it. But when he looked at me and said, it sounds like a sales pitch, but it isn't. It's real life. I need you to be my son. I want to have fun this next year. I don't want you getting up at 3 a.m. And helping me out of the shower or whatever. And when our in-home care person walked in for the first time, I felt a sense of relief that is indescribable, that I could go back to being his son, not worrying if we put too much insulin or did I not clean this thing good enough, or it's beyond description, when that in-home care person walks in and takes that pressure off.
And that is the reason. That
Yes.
is the reason why, well, a plan, but long-term care insurance is purchased, because they want their adult children to have the time to be family.
Yes.
And not to be caregivers.
Yes. But
Very
it only takes a modicum of planning. It doesn't
That's right.
take mountains and hours, and it doesn't take that. So if you're listening to this, I beg you, just do a little bit of planning. Just do a little bit. Get your powers of
Little bit.
attorney, get your documents in a row, and talk to someone about these kinds of financial products that might help you if you have this event.
and we're all going to have
And
this
then you're
event.
done.
Yeah, it's not like any of us are going to have parents that aren't going to die. I mean, it's like this is everyone. Now, the top 2% of the country that's got 7 figures in the bank, they don't have to worry about these type of things. But the other 98%
Yes,
of
they
us,
do.
Their
Yes, they
wife
do.
does, their husband does,
wife
their
does.
spouse
Yeah,
does.
They do.
I stand corrected. I stand
I
corrected.
think we made that clear.
Yes, I was so entrenched in what you're saying that I'm going to do a quick commercial that's 10 minutes behind schedule because, believe it or not, we're only 2 minutes away. And this commercial is for LTC News and Mr. Matt McCann. Planning for future long-term care can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. It's what we were just discussing. LTC News is the top internet destination for American families to learn about aging, caregiving, health, long-term care, and retirement planning. At LTC News, they provide the tools and resources to help you prepare for future costs and burdens of aging and make informed decisions. Whether you're exploring long-term care insurance, searching care costs, or facing a family crisis, that's where you need to go, to LTC News. What if your family is going through a loved one, with a loved one right now who needs care? If you have a loved one who needs care immediately, the LTC News Care Directory, this is amazing, connects you with over 80,000 in-home healthcare workers, including, of course, Amada. Throughout the country, adult care centers, assisted living, memory care, and nursing facilities, so you can find that quality care like right now, today. Please go to 62whoknew.com. Hit the LTC News icon. And by the way, our landing page is the directory for those 80,000 care people. That's incredible. So with less than a minute to go, there was still one more topic. So I hope, Cathy, you will come back and join us. And I'm going to bring a couple of other people that our sponsors are well aware with. But the statistics on how our caregivers, not the professional ones, our family caregivers, predecease the people that they were caregiving for, or at least get sick or have a stroke or a heart attack while they were trying to keep their career going and take care of their mom or dad. Those statistics stagger me. They give me the chills, how the healthcare provider can predecease or become sicker than the person that they're trying to care for. And I know that's also one of your expertise, Cathy. So I hope you will come back and join us.
I would love to
All right.
talk about that.
Thank you. This is the 4th episode. We're going to have a very special episode next week where I might be making another national announcement. for another national sponsor that's joining us that is going to change the entire scope of what we do for people throughout the country. It might be one of those last pieces of the puzzle. Very excited about that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our special guest, Cathy, our great people, Matt and Jon, that are always with us, and to everybody in America that is watching, or any healthcare professionals. Anything we can do to help somebody have a better retirement, have a high quality of life, doesn't have to be our mom and dad. Anything we can do for them, let's do it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Mike.